what we've seen really since 2014, as Putin's geopolitical campaign against the West, and of course countries such as Ukraine, has become that much sharper, we have seen Putin create what I've called a mobilization state. In the sense of, it is not totalitarianism, this is not North Korea. There is independent business and gangsters and politics and civil society and so forth. But the state reserves to itself the right at any time to reach out to anyone and say, we need you to do something. And obviously, the implication is bad things will happen if you don't. And we've seen this, for example, with businesses forced to basically create fake jobs for spies to be infiltrated in the West. We have seen this with journalists being forced to become propagandists. And we also see this happening with organized crime. Increasingly, we are seeing Russian-based organized crime outside of Russia being used as an instrument of the state. And whether it's in terms of producing the so-called local self-defense volunteers in Crimea to legitimate the actions of Russian special forces, or whether it's in terms of that many of the militias, after all, fighting in the Donbass, are essentially organized crime gangs who have now found a way of converting underworld power into political and economic power. Or whether it's elsewhere in the West. We've seen assassinations in Turkey, we have seen intelligence gathering in Finland, we have seen gathering of Chornaya Kassa, black account monies for political purposes in Estonia and elsewhere. The list goes on. It's clear that from time to time the criminals are being used as auxiliaries of the state. And given that Russian-based organized crime is the most entrepreneurial, the most globally spread of all the various criminal phenomena, that naturally has to be a concern. What we've got to realise is the Russian-based organised crime groups, and we've got to realise also that we say Russian-based, some of these are going to be Georgians and Dagestanis and so forth, but these groups are, in some ways, the first truly postmodern, post-industrial organised crime. Unlike, say, the mafia in Sicily, it's much less simply about dominating spaces. I mean, the Russian state does not permit, outside of the North Caucasus, no-go zones, areas where basically the state has to accept, well, we don't run that. So instead of actually trying to, in a way, dominate Little Italys or Chinatowns or all the other sort of territorial units that a lot of other organised crime groups go form, instead, Russian organised crime is primarily interested in the money. And what we have seen, particularly in terms of its international connectivities, is not trying to take over territory. It tried that in the 1990s when it crashed out into Central and Eastern Europe and so forth, and that didn't work. So instead it now comes out again as a merchant adventurer. And it basically speaks to other organised crime groupings. It says, what do you need? Drugs. We've got 1/3 of all Afghan heroin comes through Russia. We have methamphetamines being brewed up in laboratories around St. Petersburg. Women, we can provide you with women. Guns, hacking, money laundering, whatever service, whatever good you need, we can provide it. Because in some ways, Russia is our warehouse.